Coming up next, we've got part 2 of the behind-the-scenes story of the attempted salvage of the downed World War II B-29 bomber known as the Kee Bird. Thank you for checking out History X. My name is Ken Stano, and welcome to part 2 of our behind-the-scenes reveal of the infamous Kee Bird recovery. In part 1, we covered many aspects of this expedition not presented in the Nova documentary B-29 Frozen in Time, but were included in the fascinating book Hunting Warbirds by Carl Hoffman, such as the Kee Bird's true secret mission, the initial maintenance nightmares of Darryl's C-7 Caribou before it even made it to Thule Air Force Base, and most importantly, why a key organizer, Gary Larkins, was forced out of the expedition. In this episode, part 2, we learn how the Kee Bird mysteriously ran out of fuel, why it was a minor miracle that the Kee Bird's crew was even found, and who the hell was a guy by the name of Bobby Joe Cavnar. And of course, if you enjoy learning the behind-the-scenes facts and stories, please consider subscribing because you're not going to believe what happens next. Now here's part 2.
The team begins to set up camp, as behind them, the B-29 gleams like new in the chill Arctic sunshine. A time capsule preserved in this remote valley.
Okay, why was the Kee Bird forced to make a belly landing on the Arctic tundra of Greenland? Did they lose an engine or suffer some other mechanical failure? No. There were actually 2 reasons they were forced down. First, they were lost and essentially flying blind. They were in dense cloud cover, turbulence, and icing, and they hadn't been able to make a successful celestial fix on their position in several hours. They couldn't even determine what direction they were heading because when you're north of the Arctic Circle near the North Pole, all a compass does is swing wildly around in circles. Second, and most importantly, for some reason they were mysteriously consuming fuel at a faster than normal rate. They should have been able to complete their 26-hour mission with plenty of fuel to spare, yet after just 19 hours and 40 minutes into their flight, the Kee Bird was running on fumes and forced to ditch. So what happened to their fuel? What the crew didn't know and couldn't know until they exited the plane after the successful belly landing was their B-29's tail skid, shown here, failed to retract upon takeoff. This created an incredible amount of drag, resulting in poor flying performance and accelerated fuel consumption. It ultimately drained their fuel tanks.
All around is evidence of the remarkable story of the Kee Bird's last crew. For them, landing here had been nothing to celebrate. It had been the start of a frightening 3 days.
I honestly didn't think we was going to get out of it. I had made up my mind on the way down that this is no dream. This is reality. Face it and accept it.
Then we realized once we're out, the plane was not on fire. That was the main concern. Arnett made a hell of a good landing, and the airplane was intact.
Nobody was hurt in the crash landing, but they were stranded in a deadly climate miles from anywhere, not knowing if they would be rescued.
The biggest concern, I was too busy, frankly, wanting to get a position in to the search airplanes so somebody would know where we were. That was a big thing, establishing our position and find out where the hell we are so we could be rescued.
Our spirits are high. We knew we were going to get out. There wasn't one guy that didn't feel like we weren't going to make it. But I remember the cold and no place to go to get warm. That's the thing that I remember mostly about it.
On the second day, an Air Force plane found the Kee Bird.
The greatest we felt was when that plane flew overhead with the supplies and they knew where they actually physically spotted us. That was the greatest feeling.
Okay, the fact that the crew of the Kee Bird was located so quickly is considered by many to be a minor miracle. Remember, we're talking about a time with no satellite GPS. And after the Kee Bird's belly landing, navigator Lieutenant Cohen was able to use his sextant to determine they were somewhere along the 80th parallel at the top of the Earth. But where along the 80th parallel? And as far as search and rescue goes, this was before the era of in-flight refueling. So rescue aircraft could only stay above the search area for limited amounts of time before being forced to return to base to refuel. And as far as the weather goes, the best way to describe Greenland is huge and vast, with some of the craziest weather on Earth. Visibility is always hard to come by. Sunny and clear one minute, then rain, followed by snow the next. And oh, by the way, the temperature was 50 degrees below zero.
A day later, a plane landed beside them and flew them out to safety. Now at last, the Kee Bird was going to be rescued as well.
I've got torn feelings. And everybody's excited about getting it out, and they're going to make a lot of money on it, apparently, and everybody's going to look at this airplane. It's great and all that. But somehow it's something like going into an Indian grave, as far as I'm concerned. I kind of feel like it belongs up there.
No longer claimed by the Air Force, the Kee Bird was now available to anyone who could fly her out. Darryl and his team go to work.
Kee Bird, over.
The radio link to Thule is established. The tent set up. And Bob starts work on recovering the damaged rudder, which, despite the aluminum construction of the B-29, had been covered in fabric. Then, as the Caribou taxis to return to Thule, their precarious situation is brought home to them.
Darryl was trying to taxi around. I was out watching, and he got going a little bit, and the nose wheel just went all the way 90. Both tires rolled off, rolled off the rim, lost all their air. I thought we were stuck there.
It takes hours to dig the wheels out of the sticky mud. Rick's idea to use propane gas from the camp stove allows the Caribou to return to Thule, even though the wheels could explode if they get too hot. The plane takes off, leaving Rick, Bob, and Cecilio behind. Once at Thule, they refill the tires.
Don't make any sparks. Just don't make any sparks.
It is vital to get the bulldozer up to the B-29 and improvise a runway. But the Caribou will be seriously overloaded, and as Darryl inches the bulldozer onto the plane, Roger is concerned.
It's a little bit higher risk than I really thought it would be, because Darryl can access everything to the limit. If both engines run, it'll get off the ground. But if one engine quits, we're just going to have to crash straight ahead because one engine's not going to carry the load.
The Caribou, slow and cumbersome, returns to the B-29. Rick lights a bonfire so that Roger knows the wind direction for his landing. As the dangerously overloaded Caribou comes into land, people on the ground do not realize that something has gone seriously wrong. The flaps had failed, and Roger had nearly lost control.
We came in no flapper. I came up.
I knew you were coming.
90 knots. I was stalling. I was in this shaker at 90, and Darryl said we can't do it without the flaps. I thought, I don't want to go all the way back to it. We're getting low on fuel.
The Caribou has plowed into the soft earth. Another inch and the propellers would have smashed into the ground. Disaster had been narrowly averted. Darryl puts the bulldozer to work on the B-29, immediately proving its worth. The Kee Bird is back on dry land for the first time in half a century.
All this time you've heard about how the crew of the Kee Bird made a successful belly landing on the tundra of Greenland. So then why is the B-29 bomber sitting on its landing gear? Okay, the answer to that, remember mystery man Gary Larkins from part 1? Well, 12 months earlier, in August of 1993, Gary Larkins, along with Darryl, Rick, and a helicopter pilot named Tommy Hauptman, flew to the Kee Bird site in Darryl's UH-1 Huey helicopter. They brought all kinds of tools, ladders, hydraulic jacks, camping gear, and a 55-gallon drum of World War II grade aviation fuel. Their goal was to raise the B-29 from its belly, stand it up on its landing gear, inspect the damage, and attempt to start one of its engines. And as you can see, they successfully stood the Kee Bird on its landing gear. They then replaced the spark plugs on the left outboard engine, pumped aviation fuel into the carburetor, and cranked over the engine after 47 years. Believe it or not, it ran beautifully. But if you remember, and as we pointed out in part 1, Darryl Greenamyer and Gary Larkins, they simply did not like each other at all. And as that left outboard engine heated up, so did the tensions between Darryl and Gary.
When the giant B-29 crashed in 1947, the bomb bay doors suffered the most obvious damage. They will be taken off to be replaced later.
Well, the snow really cushioned it real well. It built up under the bomb bays, and the bomb bay doors took all the load. And about 90% of the damage. There's a little bit of damage on the aft fuselage, and on the flaps, but that's it.
Okay, coming up in part 3, we've got more of the recovery work on the Kee Bird. So please consider subscribing because the crew replaces the engines, tires, and propellers. You're not going to want to miss that. And if you haven't guessed, yes, their C-7 Caribou transport plane fights them every step of the way. My name is Ken Stano. Thank you for checking out History X.